So my guest on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast is Dr. James Lovinsky. Now, James is a doctor in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. He's also founder of Opus Total Health in West Greenwich, Rhode Island. Now, his journey into healthcare started after years in the tech world, where long hours and chronic pain, let's face it, we can often identify with that one, pushed him to explore alternative ways to heal. What began as personal curiosity turned into a lifelong passion for integrative medicine, combining acupuncture, nutrition, herbal therapy, and functional medicine to help people truly feel well again. This is going to apply to you if you feel you've tried everything. And we're going to find hopefully some little tips and tricks in terms of hopefully an improved holistic lifestyle and well-being going forward. So welcome to the show, James.
Oh, thanks so much for that fantastic introduction, Neil.
There's a big build-up. There's big expectations. You've got to deliver now.
That's all right. I like talking about my job.
Yeah, so just before we kind of get into that, because I know you've got a whole bunch of kind of things and ideas to kind of share with people so they can sort of explore this further and go deeper. But for you, I mean, obviously this tech journey and I guess burnout and some of the pain that comes with, a very hectic kind of, professional life. How was that for you? Kind of where did all that begin?
Well, I mean, I was always technically inclined. So, when I was a kid, back in those days, it was Tandy 1000 and, HP, I don't know, Compaq, I think was one of the early computers that we had, but my dad was an entrepreneur and, we did some early website work for his business just with straight HTML. We had this little editor called Hot Dog and I got a job, I think in high school to build a website for the town that I lived in where I grew up in Vermont. And basically they put out a contest and I was the only one that entered it. So, but at that point, I think by then there was CSS and PHP. So I did a little bit of PHP coding and I built a nice website at the time and I liked it and it felt easy to me for the money that I made. And, so then I went to college and I studied economics and anthropology. Not the most practical things in the world, but at the time I've always been interested in the human condition and how we end up the way that we end up and, how much of it is from our inborn personality and our upbringing with our family and our society and culture. And so I think that's really what drew me to anthropology and economics. And I took a lot of classes in philosophy and liberal arts. And when I got out of school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I wasn't ready to pursue a graduate degree. So I kind of fell into doing some tech work. And I was building websites. And then I got a job as a like systems administrator, tech support person at a small local college. So I was managing a small network and keeping printers running and helping people set up their email and that sort of thing. And I built a lot of small websites for local businesses. And at the time in my 20s, I was very concerned about what I perceived as the state of the world and geopolitics. And, I had, it was partly my work in tech and partly just at the time I was trying to work too much. So I had the job at the school. I was building websites. I was waiting tables. I was raising farm animals like, pigs and cows and things like that. So I had a lot of pokers in the fire, if you want to put it that way, or however, whatever saying you want to use. So, you're absolutely right. I ended up just with burnout, tech neck, I had a lot of pain in my neck and shoulders, and I started having some, numbness and tingling down my arms and things like that. And I had always kind of been interested in alternative health since I was a kid. I I got car sick when I was a kid, motion sickness, and we would often go on long drives to visit my grandparents. And sometimes I would take Dramamine or some over the counter medication, but I didn't really like them, especially for shorter drives, because they made me so sleepy. And my mom discovered these things called um, C bands. So they're these little tight elastic bands with a plastic knob, and they go on the wrist on an acupuncture point that helps reduce motion sickness, nausea, morning sickness, related symptoms. And I found them very effective. And I really liked that I didn't have to take a medication. So I was kind of primed um, to uh, be interested in Chinese medicine. And, I took some classes, Tai Chi and Qigong and things like that, and yoga. And um, so anyway, in my late 20s, I started having some kind of classic burnout, stress related symptoms, nightmares and trouble sleeping and just feeling exhausted all the time in the morning. Now I know that that has a lot to do with circadian rhythm disruption and, um, you know, issues with cortisol regulation and other hormonal problems. But at the time, I just felt deeply that I wasn't very happy, and I wasn't healthy, and I wasn't feeling the way that I want to feel. And, eventually I started feeling dizzy, having these funny dizzy spells. And, one morning I was at breakfast and I got stressed out, and, um, all of a sudden I got tunnel vision and I blacked out, and I came to on the floor. My poor mom and my sister were hoping that I wasn't choking or having a heart attack or something like that. And as it turns out, I had basically a fainting episode. The medical term is vasovagal syncope. So, basically I had low blood sugar, and the stress caused a sudden drop in blood pressure, and I passed out. So, but that was a real wake up call for me. That night I had this uh, a nightmare about sort of Pandora's box opening up, and all these creatures coming out into my house. And so I took it as a sign that I really needed to make some changes in my life, um, and ended up in an acupuncturist's office after, I saw a number of alternative practitioners, chiropractors, and an intuitive healer. And I'll forever be grateful to them for their help. But yeah, the acupuncturist, I told him my story, and he said, it sounds like you have liver wind, which is a Chinese diagnosis for the symptoms of stress burnout. And he said, even though all your labs are normal and the doctors say, oh, you just need to chill out, this is something that we can treat with acupuncture and herbal medicine. And so I followed his directions and I got treatment. And within a few months, I started feeling better. And I decided to go back to school for a pre-med course at the acupuncture school. And that's how I ended up in acupuncture school. I had been thinking about studying psychology, actually, like you did, and ended up in Chinese medicine school. I looked into some different options, and it had helped me so much personally that I was drawn to it for that reason. And I also like that we have in the U.S. we have a pretty broad scope of practice as an acupuncturist and a Chinese herbalist. I have a lot of tools at my disposal that I can use to help people, and I like that about it. So
it's an interesting one, though, isn't it? Because it's almost like I'm sensing that you possibly, if you hadn't have gone through that experience, you probably wouldn't be where you are today doing what you're doing, because it feels like it was almost a journey that kind of curated your now lifestyle, which is obviously helping others to kind of overcome, obviously in theory, chronic illness as well as kind of burnout, et cetera, et cetera. Did you feel that it was almost like you had to have been there to see it and go through it to be able to almost sort of self-qualify for that?
yeah, I would say so. For me, that's been my journey. My wife is also an acupuncturist, and I met her in school. And her journey was quite different. She knew that she wanted to be an acupuncturist much earlier. She had some positive uh, experiences with treatment, receiving treatment from acupuncture. Um, and a lot of my colleagues in the US, some of them sort of knew early on that they wanted to be in acupuncture or wanted to help people. Many of them are nurses or massage therapists who went back to school to become acupuncturists. Um, but for me, I think that my journey took me in this direction because of my interest in personal development and understanding the human condition and wanting to, you know, be able to help people. Um, I think I realized, after I had that fainting episode, the syncope, there was a period of time where I was kind of reevaluating my life. And I was right around, 29, 30 years old, that Saturn returns time when a lot of people have turning points in their life. And um, so I started thinking about, okay, the way that things have been going, I'm not happy with. So maybe it's time to go do something different. And I considered different options, and I thought about what parts of my life at the time I really liked and what things I wanted to change. And some of the things that I really liked about all of the various jobs that I had been working at the time was basically interacting with people and talking to them and getting to know them and helping them solve problems in their life. The part that I liked about doing tech support was not, the long hours after work or the weekends trying to chase down annoying, tedious bugs in a server, or, fix some little CSS division for a sidebar on a website, by myself, banging my head against the wall. The things that I liked was, planning the website out with the client and going back and forth with them and figuring out, what they wanted from the website and how it could help them. And then, the process of working with them to build it, and then seeing how they felt happy afterwards, when with the finished product, and that it would help them, or, fixing somebody's printer and the relief that they had. So, this was partly a way for me to more directly help people with sort of higher level upstream problems that they might have, instead of focusing on, you know, the mixed bag of tech. And, I don't mean to, I have a lot of respect for people in tech, and I still do some of my own website development for my own websites. And I don't know if I should say that, because people are going to go look at it and say, "Oh boy, this guy, what's he doing?" But it's a useful skill set. So yeah.
And it feels like there's a level of almost self-awareness, if I use that kind of phrase, or this kind of self-curiosity that I guess gets you away from, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, but almost the masses who would be looking for a quick fix with standard normal over-the-counter medication. It's like, I've got this issue, I want to power on through. I don't want to be giving up my job, I don't want to be losing the late nights of working because I can make more money if I do it that way, and yet it's hurting me. So I'll take some over-the-counter medicine or some kind of prescribed medicine, and oh, now I've got some side effects. So now what's going to happen? Well, I'm going to take some other medicine to accompany that because it'll get rid of those side effects. Oh, now those have got side effects. And it's this cumulative challenge. I hear a lot of people saying this, that I'm taking now so many medications and various kind of formulas because I've almost created this monster. And it's possibly because I haven't really looked at, well, like you've said there, lifestyle, the burnout, the kind of overcommitments, and maybe just piecing together the things that aren't really serving you at a certain point in life. Am I kind of sort of reading that right, that this level of self-awareness is just such a helpful thing when you take that time to reflect and say, look, hold on, something's not quite right here, and I don't think any standard medication is going to fix it. I've got to really look inward.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think you're really hitting the nail on the head there. And it's part of the journey, I mean, I started out in that same place. You just want to fix a quick fix for whatever it is that's bothering you. And of course, a lot of times you can get a quick fix for things, especially, when you're younger. a lot of the symptoms and things that come up are external. And that's one of the things that I learned in Chinese medicine school that I really appreciated. The diagnostic system differentiates between what they call internal causes of disease and external causes of disease. Um, you know, uh, so external causes of disease are things like infection, illnesses caused by bacteria and viruses, you know, uh, exposure to the elements, which of course, in traditional societies, people spent a lot of time outside if it's an agrarian society. So, people would get sick because they're outside in the cold or the wet, planting crops or whatever. Injuries, you break your ankle or something like that. Obviously, that's an external cause of disease. But then the internal causes of diseases are things like repressed emotions, um, unhealthy thoughts that are unresolved and uh, continue to come up and sort of live in your brain. And, um, over time, those can cause physical symptoms. And what I've learned through my research, and it's partly from studying Chinese medicine, but also studying um, Gurdjieff and another man named Moravieff who wrote. Yeah, they're both Europeans, but they have a system that basically their system posits that each person has a physical body and then an emotional body or an emotional center and an intellectual center, and all three of those centers are connected and interrelated and constantly affecting each other. And we see this reflected in our biology via the sort of gut brain and the heart brain and our physical brain in our head. There are neurons and serotonin receptors in the gut that play a big role in our emotional well-being and how we feel. And our heart, researchers have found that our heart sends more signals back to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. We have this sort of idea that the brain is the control center and it is just sending signals and coordinating everything. And it's like the central computer, and everything else is sort of this passive machine that runs and is coordinated by the brain. But it's actually a much more complicated sort of two-way system in the body, and the peripheral and the organs and the brain, everything is coordinating and communicating with each other all the time. So basically, unresolved emotions, especially emotions like frustration, regret, envy, guilt, those kinds of emotions, if they're not processed and if you don't process them and move past them over time, they can cause physical illness. And oftentimes those physical symptoms manifest in a way that sort of grows over time. So in my example, at the time, when I got sick before I went back to school, I had a lot of frustration for various reasons in my life. And I had some difficult personal relationships that were causing me a great deal of heartache. And so I started having physical symptoms that were manifesting. And when I went and saw my doctor, they ran lab tests and they said, well, everything looks okay. You're stressed out. You got to go take care of that. And when I went to see an acupuncturist, I encountered this much more rich vocabulary for describing what was going on and seeing how that there were ways to address it that were targeted towards the symptoms that I was having and the feelings that I was having. That resonated with me. And so, yeah.
So I'm picking up from this sort of more natural, let's call it holistic approach, which is kind of, it's kind of meeting things where they are rather than just going straight to a diagnosis. It feels like it's more about the listening and the sensing and just being aware of actually what's going on. And I guess for a lot of people, what you're giving them here is quite a bit of hope, because the external stuff that you've described there, often you could argue is outside of our control, our personal control, unless you're isolating yourself against the world. And even if you try and do that, still stuff's going to come through and get through. But by starting maybe with the internal stuff and really addressing that, and it's very interesting, I want to go deeper into the whole heart thing in a minute, but it feels like there's an opportunity here that if you listen to the signs, the internal signs, you're conscious about your thinking, the way you respond, the emotions that are coming through in certain situations, or when you have certain thoughts, it's almost like you can nip these in the bud, or you can at least attend to them with a little bit of help from maybe acupuncture or other kinds of support. It feels like it's starting from within, rather than just thinking, oh, there's an external trigger, okay, I need to fight back against that. Feels like it's a little bit more inward.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's at least that's been my experience. And you're right. I like what you said about focusing on what's in our control. That was a big part of my shift in thinking and moving from that place of frustration and burnout to becoming healthy again and learning and growing. I mean, the really in many ways, the only thing that's under our control is how we think about what happens to us and how we respond to external situations and how we think about ourselves and how we think about our relationships. You can't, if you're in a car accident or whatever, you break your leg or something like that. Oftentimes, what can you do? It's outside of your control. You can take your vitamins and exercise and eat well and do all the things right. And sometimes you're still going to catch a cold and get sick. But you can work with your thoughts and work with, downstream of that is your emotions. And one of the analogies that I encountered that I really like is that the body is like this physical carriage that's being drawn by two horses, and the horses are the emotions. And then you have a driver, and the driver is like your conscious thoughts. So the way that it's supposed to work is that the driver kind of holds the reins and guides the horses. So you're guiding and curating your emotions by how you think about things. And the horses, the emotions are bringing the body in the directions that the driver wants to go. Now, a lot of people are in a situation where the driver is kind of asleep most of the time. He falls asleep, he gets distracted. The horses are kind of wild. They're running all over the place. And, sometimes the carriage maybe is driving the horses downhill because it's in such bad condition that, the emotions are out of control because your physiology is imbalanced. So somebody like me, my job is to sort of come along and wake up your driver and say, hey, listen, let me help you calm down your horses, get things under control. Let's make some repairs on your carriage, fix that broken wheel and clean it up and decide which direction you want to go and help you get back on track with, things calm down and in a reasonable state where you can manage things and go where you want to go. And I think I just want to address also what you said about, approaching things from a more holistic, natural way. Maybe it's because of my background in tech, but one of the differences between traditional systems like Chinese medicine or like Ayurvedic system from India is that it's a naturalistic model. So it looks at the body as an environment, or like an organism. It's a complex system. It can get too hot, it can get too cold, it needs fuel. We're looking at it like an environment. And some of the analogies in Chinese medicine is very much, they talk about the stomach as like a rice cooker, a pot cooking rice, and the lower organs provide the heat, and the spleen and the stomach are cooking the food, and then the vapors rise up into the chest, and the heart and the lungs pump the food, the chest chi and the food chi through the body. And it's basically it's different language and a different understanding simpler understanding to explain the same physiology that we encounter in modern medicine and modern physiology. But one of the ways I've come to understand it is that it's a matter of resolution. So Western medicine tends to be very high resolution. It's like having an image that has a very high pixel density, and it's got a lot of detail. And Chinese medicine has some some various lower resolution ways of looking at the body. And of course, both high resolution and low resolution has value, especially in a health situation. With a lower resolution tool, it allows you to sort of see the lay of the land, assess what's going on very quickly, and immediately see that, okay, these things are out of balance. We've got some tools that we can use immediately to try to restore balance. It's a quick intervention and maybe inexpensive. And the response that we get back is diagnostic. So, if somebody comes in and they're having headaches, and we use one of these tools and we say, okay, it looks like this pattern. Let's give you this herbal remedy. And, they show improvement, then that's confirmation that our diagnosis is right. And in the meantime, if we need to run some labs or diagnostic tests, they can get some treatment right away that's helping us with our diagnostic process. Or maybe we don't need to run expensive lab tests or, go down that route. But I like the idea. For me, what works for me and the people that I work with is to start with sort of lower resolution, simpler tools, less intervention, and then move slowly towards more intervention and more digging and yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we were designed to be well, weren't we? We were designed to be in balance. As soon as we arrived on this planet, in the body, or the containers, some people call it, that we've arrived in, it was designed to be balanced. The energy flow, however you describe it, was meant to be in equilibrium. Everything is meant to flow and be working pretty much to the optimum. Why do you feel people struggle so much to kind of almost revert back to that balanced state? Is it because of an obsession with the external? Because, if we go chasing stuff, if we kind of compare ourselves to others, if we kind of, let's say, fail at a mission to be successful in however we define success, it can kind of almost skew things, can't it? Both mentally, but also potentially physically, from what you're saying. Why do you feel we sabotage this? Because to be in balance must feel as it does. I think we all know the kind of feeling was, I've got energy, I feel great today. Why do we kind of almost push against that?
I think there's different reasons for sure. And to some extent, it depends on the person. There are different people kind of focus on different things, but I think a big reason is that for a lot of people, our society is very materialistic. So, and that's a relatively recent phenomenon. If you look back in history, prior to, 100, 200 years ago, people, our thinking was that the spiritual realm was primary, and we were spiritual beings living having a material experience. Now I think the thinking is very much very materialistic, and if we can't touch it, it's not real. And the thoughts that we're having, the feelings that we're having, are merely electrical impulses in the brain and in the body. And I think that the danger there is that we tend to identify with our body. We identify with it. So by thinking that I am my body, that's it. If my body's having a problem and I'm having these uncomfortable sensations and feelings and problems, and the body's not performing the way that I want to, it causes us a great deal of pain and suffering on an emotional level that just worsens and compounds the symptoms that we're having and the sensations that we're having. So, what I do and what I recommend to people I work with is that you cultivate an attitude of a sort of healthy detachment from your body. Treat your body as if it's a pet that you're, or a child that you're responsible for caring for, or a vehicle, if you like a car. You want to take good care of it because you want it to be healthy and you want it to live a long time. You want it to work well. If you have a car, you want to take good care of it and get as many miles out of it as you can. And of course, when you buy a car, you get to choose if you get a Ferrari or a Range Rover, or some cheap piece of junk that just gets you around town. But when you're born, you don't really get to choose. So to some extent, the capabilities of your vehicle is predetermined by just, this is what you were born into, and then you have to kind of make the best of it. Um, but I think that that's a big part of it. I think that causes a lot of suffering for people, that just identification with the physical material of the body. Um, and then I had another thought that flew out of my head. Maybe you can help me out.
Well, I wondered if it was anything to do actually with the heart thing. I wanted to come full circle back to the heart, because the way you're defining it, and I know there's a lot of people kind of doing work in this. Greg Braden is one who's very vocal about this. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this kind of heart intelligence, and this whole idea of actually almost having conversations with your heart. Now, to some people hearing that for the first time would be like, Neil, have you really lost it? But actually, when you think about it, it is a kind of almost a center. If we're talking energy here, it is an energy center of its own. I mean, you would not be here listening or watching this if your heart was not doing its thing, almost independently of the rest of everything else that's going on. So it is distinct to your body when you actually stop and think about it, because of its kind of unconscious repetition of beating, and all the intelligence that you say is then being passed back to the brain. Do you think we've again lost sight of, as we chase all these material kind of needs as we're perceiving them, do you think we've lost sight of kind of really having conversations with our heart?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our society has really moved away from a lot of traditional understandings like that. And, people, um, there aren't as many people with religious upbringings and having conversations in prayer and meditation as there used to be, perhaps. And, um, you know, s- I, I think some of that comes out of the sort of idea of mind body dualism, and this separation of the body and the emotions from the mind. And um you know yeah, most people have had an experience of going to the doctor and having some symptoms that they can't figure out, and then they say, well, maybe it's in your head. Well, yeah, I mean, everything's in your head to a certain extent, right? Because everything's processed in your head and things like that. But there are plenty of symptoms that and feelings that we have that come from the sources of an emotion. And in my opinion, from my personal experience, from meditation and prayer and from study, emotions, I think, happen, the lower emotions at least happen in the body. We have sensations in our body that everybody's had. A good one is embarrassment or shame. You feel that your face flushes and you get that funny hot sensation, or that pit in your stomach, that kind of like dropping sensation that oh gosh, I did something wrong, I hurt somebody's feelings. Or anger is another good one. People just get hot headed. A lot of our ways of describing the emotions describe that. And so the heart in Chinese medicine is the seat of the Shen, and the Shen has to do with the like spirit. And it's very similar to the idea in European culture of courage. The word courage comes from the Latin word for heart, and to have heart means that you have courage, and that you are able to um, articulate what you believe in and stand up for what you believe in. And um, so Shen and the heart is a lot about being authentic, and um, being connected with maybe the higher emotional center, which the higher emotional center could be thought of as, the higher self, kind of in new age terms, or, there's different ways to think about that. But, in my life, I find that that sort of thread manifests often in dreams. And I find for me that there are different types of dreams that, there's this sort of run of the mill every day, I'm processing my day dream, which, it kind of comes out of your body, and you can tell that because you'll wake up in a funny position. You're having a funny dream and you wake up in a funny position, where your body jerks and you wake up, and oftentimes the content is a weird mishmash of whatever happened in the day or the last couple of days. And it's just, your brain and your body are kind of processing whatever stress that you're having that day. But then, sometimes we have dreams that feel like they come from somewhere else. They're a dream about something that happens later, or it's a dream that's a warning about some big decision that you're going to make. And it's interesting. Like I've had dreams that are warnings about decisions, like, oh, there's danger here, be careful. I've never had a dream telling me to do a certain thing. I have had dreams after I make a big decision. Like, for instance, we, with Opus Total Health, with the clinic that we own, I actually, I say, it says I'm the founder on the podcast, and I'm a founder of the way that it is now. But the clinic was started and run by another acupuncturist who retired, and my wife and I, he sold the sort of the physical location to us, and we took over for him with his patients. And I had a lot of anxiety going into buying that business. And the morning that I was going to sign the papers, I had this amazing dream of, just being surrounded by my ancestors, all smiling at me and hugging me. And, it's very positive and helpful. At another turning point in my life, I was deciding whether or not to stay in San Francisco after I graduated from acupuncture school. And I had, was interviewing for a position at the school where I learned acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And, my brain thought it was a fantastic idea, and I was very excited about it. And the night after my first interview, I had a terrible nightmare. I woke up with a crick in my neck. And, after the earlier experience with the fainting episode and Pandora's box, I knew that was a warning. This is not the direction that you should be going in. There's a lot of danger here. And so I listened to that. But yeah, so the heart, I think, the thing about the heart is it's a quiet voice. You talk about having conversations with your heart. It's a quiet voice. You have to ask and you have to listen. And sometimes, sometimes the louder voices are, drown it out. And the way to learn how to listen to what your heart thinks about things is through quiet contemplation and meditation and prayer. As I ramble on here, I sort of connected back to what we were talking about earlier about why people have, if our bodies are designed to be healthy, why do we have so many problems with illness and chronic disease nowadays? Another factor I want to talk about is just, and a lot of people talk about sedentary lifestyle, but our bodies evolved outside. And in traditional societies, we spent a lot of time outside and a lot of time moving our bodies, hunter gatherers, a lot of time outside hunting and gathering, right? Agrarian societies, you could argue, maybe too much. And so that they had a lot of health problems that came out of too much physical labor and too much physical challenge. But now, modern society, most of us spend a lot of our time sitting at desks, in front of computers or on the phone, long commutes in cars or on buses and subways. So in Chinese medicine terminology, all of that sitting and the lack of movement causes stagnation. So that's the term that we use for it is stagnation. And you can think of that as in the physical body, as we understand it with modern science, the stagnation that occurs is blood stagnation, poor circulation in the tissues. And that comes out of, you're sitting in a long time, you're holding a posture, the muscles are tight, it restricts the blood flow in different parts of the body. So a lot of the pain that people feel, like the tech neck that I used to get and the back pain and it comes out of just the postural muscles being asked to hold a position for long periods of time and just screaming because of all the lactic acid and because they're so tight that, the blood just is not getting in there as much as it should be. And also, sedentary lifestyle, we don't develop physically as much in a strong way as someone who was working in the fields, or, a lumberjack or a knight, or one of the many sort of archetypal characters that we aspired to be when we were children, but if it wasn't a sedentary lifestyle of modern society, there would be some other challenge. With a traditional society, they dealt with exposure to the elements and, periods with not enough food to eat. With traditional agrarian societies, there's overwork and, again, challenges with with sanitation and all those sorts of things. So to some extent, I think that although our bodies are designed to be healthy, life is constantly challenging us. And that's part of just how things are here. It's a survival of the fittest sort of plane, if you want to call it that way. Or, we see this in the natural world as well. Birds and animals are designed to be healthy, but many of them end up as food for other animals, or they become injured, or they don't get, it's hard to get exactly the right mix of food, nutrients, sleep, exercise, it's almost, that's one of those things I'm not sure that you can control, and get just perfect. We can optimize somewhat, but the danger is that if you try to focus on it and control it too much, you get diminishing returns. So I think the sweet spot is probably, try to do what you think is best 75-80% of the time. If you get too much into it, like you see some of these people who, I forget what the guy's name is. Is it Brian Johnson, the like tech bro who's
longevity?
He's trying to keep himself young, and he's spending whatever tens of millions of dollars every year, and most of his day is involved in, doing all of his routines so that he can stay as young as long as possible. And I think, that's part of his journey. But for me, when I tried to over optimize my diet, it caused me stress, which the stress affected my digestion. So it was counterproductive. So fostering an attitude of curiosity and experimentation and adventure, I think, sort of offsets that a little bit, so that you can try things like, okay, I'm going to try the latest fad diet or cleanse or whatever and see if it's a helpful tool for me, without sort of getting too tense and gripping too hard to try to force things to go the way that you want to go. Because you're always going to have health challenges, and you're always going to have challenges in your life, because that's just how life is. That's how we grow and evolve. And so anyway.
So do you think, would you say then, to kind of, if somebody's listening to this and saying, James, you talk so much sense, and I didn't realize it was like this, but what is my next step, or my first step, as it would be? Is it then a case of, rather than just I think, this, actually going into also giving your heart a chance to say, I feel this. So rather than just always going down the brain first thinking route to make a decision or make a choice or something, actually say, how do I feel about that too? And almost doing thinking and feeling in kind of equal measure. Would that be a kind of a natural way of taking that first step? Because it feels that's kind of part of an awakening before then maybe going to, kind of the Chinese medicine kind of approach, and almost going in sort of fully armed just with that kind of that information, if you like.
Yeah, I think that that's a good way to do it. And my own process, I tend to, there's a great book that I could recommend to your listeners. It's by an author named Ian McGilchrist. It's called The Master and His Emissary. It's a massive book, but you can look it up on, there's a shorter sort of idea on Wikipedia, there are videos on YouTube and things, but basically the idea is the master and his emissary. The master is supposed to be the sort of, intuitive, right brain, creative, heart-centered way of thinking. Now that way of thinking is, there are intuitive jumps, and there's a creativity there that the left brain, the rational brain, is incapable of. So his theory is that the sort of left brain rational thinking is the emissary. It's supposed to be the master's sort of sets the direction, and the emissary works to make it happen. Now in modern society, because of some of the things that we've been talking about, the emissary has sort of taken the place of the master, and the master is often ignored or not heard. So the proper role of the rational mind is to sort of, okay, I need to make this decision. Say you are unhappy with your job and it's starting to manifest in physical symptoms. Your back hurts all the time. You're having heart palpitations and trouble sleeping, and you just kind of know, boy, I really should make some changes, because if I stay in this job for the next 20 years, just because I want to get a pension or whatever, sometimes you got to, right? Because you got to stay there because people are counting on you. You got to keep that stable income for now, because your kids you got to keep a roof over your head, feed your family, right? But you can still think about, like, okay, rationally, let's see, what are some options that I can do? What's in my control? Are there things that I can do to make this job that I have now more tolerable? Or are there things that I can do to kind of like bring the spark back into it so it's interesting again and not awful? Or, are there other ways that I could go? Let me just explore a whole bunch of options. That's like the classic kind of pros and cons, researching, looking at different things. But oftentimes what will happen is we'll come to a point where, all things being equal, you're like, well, gosh, how do I make this decision? There's different ways that I could go here, but I can see, different pluses and minuses about the different directions, and I don't know how to decide. And that's when it's a good time to step back, set all the researching aside, give it a break for a few days, and look inside and check with, okay, what do I want to do, and what feels best for me? What do I think is best? And then you have that conversation, and that could look like, taking a vacation and taking a trip into the mountains and going for a hike and spending some time out in nature. Or it could look like spending some extra time, praying or meditating. Or it could be journaling. Journaling can be very effective, because you can literally have a conversation with yourself on paper. You're thinking on paper. Oftentimes we don't think about it, but there are lots of sort of competing voices in our minds, and we sort of have conversations with ourselves all the time. So you can do it on paper. You ask yourself questions and write it down, and it's a very interesting process, because you end up seeing that there are sort of different interests and different ideas about how things should go, and you come to feel you feel different, when you're in a mood. What's a mood? A mood is sort of like a posture. It's a collection of a way of thinking and a way of feeling in your body and emotions. And um, so, yeah, that answers your question?
I think it does. I think it does. James, I want to connect people with you. I mean, you've given us so many kind of concepts and ideas and, amazing stuff to kind of think about here. And we've been on quite a journey actually over the last kind of 50 minutes or so. But I want people to kind of have a little bit of a call to action here and sort of find out more about you and connect. Where should they go? What's the web address?
So personally, I have a Twitter and X account. It's James Lovinsky, like my name. I can send you the link if you like. I'm not super active posting there. I was a little bit more active like around a year ago, and I posted some interesting threads about gut health and things like that your readers might be interested in. And so that's a good place. My clinic is called Opus Total Health. And so the website is opustotalhealth.com. That's very much focused on the physical clinic. It's kind of like a local site. And I'm currently working on overhauling it, but I am going to have a lot of information on there. There's some now, and we're going to very shortly have more information about, acupuncture and how it works for various conditions like back pain or sciatica or, anxiety and stress. And then I also have a personal website, jameslovinsky.com. I haven't updated it in a while, but I plan on starting to work on that this year. So maybe by the time this goes live, I'll start to have some more recent material on there. But what I want to do is write about these kinds of topics and maybe make some videos at some point just discussing it, and so that I can start having more conversations like this, because of course it helps us refine our thinking and grow, and we find people who resonate with us and people we can help and people who can help us. So thanks so much for the opportunity. Yeah.
No, it's been great. And I do thank you, James, for kind of, taking us down so many different routes. There's almost something for everybody in this. And I think that's the beauty, both of the topic, but also the way you describe it, is that there are so many different angles you can approach here. So thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
Oh, really happy to do it. I really enjoyed the conversation, Neil. Thank you.